The FCAC, and that's the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, released a report highlighting its concerns with the trend towards longer amortization loans in Canada. But our next guest says the FCAC missed the mark on many key issues. For more on the auto finance market, joining us from Ottawa is Michael Hatch. He's the chief economist at the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association. Good morning, Michael.
Hi, Francis. Thank you for having me.
Great to see you. You say that the FCAC is overstating the risk of longer-term loans. How so?
Well, in a number of important ways. I mean, we as dealers have obviously been aware of this trend over the past decade or so, the trend towards longer amortization for automotive loans. In the past 10 years, the average loan term has gone from about 65 months to about 72 months. So that's about a 10% increase over the past decade, so about a percentage point a year on average. So it's an undeniable trend. The numbers are clear, and nobody is denying that that trend is taking place. But alongside that trend, which is a fact that is not getting a whole lot of attention, is the fact that vehicles are lasting a lot longer. In 2015, for the first time ever, the average age of the vehicle fleet in Canada reached 10 years. So the average car driving around on our roads right now is a decade old. Furthermore, the life expectancy, I guess for lack of a better term, of a car that comes off of an assembly line today is a lot longer than that. So consumers are taking a little bit longer to pay off their automotive loans, but they're backed by cars that are lasting longer. And also in a 0% or near 0% interest rate environment, which is the environment that we're in for a lot of automotive finance in Canada, it's a rational choice on the part of the consumer to extend that loan over a longer period of time. So, you know, we're aware of the trend. You know, it can't go on forever, but it's fully sustainable at today's levels.
Notwithstanding the cars are lasting longer, most people don't keep their car as long as 12 years. I'm probably one of the few that's driving a 10-year-old car. They also express some concern about the car loan treadmill, which is kind of turning over cars a lot more quickly than their age would suggest, and that's a concern for the FCAC. You don't have that concern?
Not to the same degree, no. I mean, there's a certain piece of the market out there, consumers that are coming in with negative equity, so owing more on the vehicle than what the vehicle is currently worth, but that remains a very small minority. And if you take that small minority and dig a little bit deeper, most of the people in negative equity are some combination of a very small amount of negative equity, so a negligible amount, or they're high-income consumers, so they can afford to roll the negative equity that they have into the next vehicle purchase. And also, the number one indicator that I would point to that tells us that the debt at today's levels remains sustainable in the automotive financing world is the delinquency ratio. So the actual percentage of consumers that are behind on their payments or are unable to repay that debt, and it's 1.2, 1.3%. And anybody in the financing world would tell you that that's rock solid. And it's also the lowest delinquency ratio of any form of consumer debt. It's lower than lines of credit. It's lower than the delinquency ratio for installment loans, for credit card debt. All the major forms of consumer debt have much higher delinquency ratios than automotive debt. So that in and of itself tells me that, again, at today's levels, it's entirely sustainable and backed up again by vehicles that are lasting longer.
Are delinquency rates, though, a lagging indicator? Because a lot of people, of course, are worried about things like the economic backdrop in this country, the rising unemployment rate, especially in places like Alberta.
There are pockets of there are regions in the country that obviously are going through challenges on the economic front, not just in the automotive world. The provinces and the regions that are heavily exposed to the resource sector, Alberta, you mentioned, Newfoundland and Labrador, for example. And you know, it's natural that provinces and regions going through more challenging economic times than perhaps others are going to see a higher delinquency ratio than perhaps others. And it's gone up in some regions as much as 10%, but you have to put that into context. Going from 1.1% to 1.2%, the delinquency ratio, that is a 10% increase. So, you know, it's challenging for the consumers in those parts of the countries that are having to default, but the numbers remain very low. The numbers remain manageable. And again, by far, automotive debt it continues to enjoy the lowest default ratio of any form of consumer debt. Nobody's arguing that the trend that we're seeing can carry on forever. We're not arguing hoping for a 100-month amortization. But again, at today's levels, it's totally sustainable.
Michael Hatch, thank you very much for taking the time with us this morning.
And thank you for having me.
Chief Economist at the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association. There are two sides of every story, and that's one side. We will be taking the opening bells when we come back.